Alright, so this video is going to be about how to fix up the textures you get from ripping from Warframe in Gimp specifically. I usually use Photoshop because I think it's easier, but I get Photoshop for free because I'm in college. So if you don't have Photoshop or you can't get it or it's too much, it's whatever, you don't need it. The reason I have Blender open is because the easiest way for me to see the images, if I just look at it in Windows, this is where the rip has gone. I have a bunch of these DDS files that Windows won't let me look at. So the easiest way I usually do it is you don't have to have like a model, but you go to a material here, go into its texture, and then just go to that file that you have exported your stuff to, and Blender will let you see it automatically. This is just how I do it. If you have any other way of, you just need to see what the textures look like, and you'll see a lot of messy looking things. Now, the simplest way to look at it is any of these blue guys are normal maps, and you don't need to touch them. They export fine. You can just put them into Unity fine. They're good. And they usually end in _2. So it's always gonna be text underscore a number. That number doesn't matter, and then underscore something else. And when it's _2, it's the normal map. And you can see here, it's not _2. This is a very it's not always gonna work. It's just something to go off. Normal maps are easy because they're always this blue color until they're yellow like this guy or this one or this one. But they always looks very similar to each other. So they usually end in 2. The _7s are emission maps. Is how it works. All these guys. That one's 14. See, so it does change, but you can see even though he's 14 and this guy's 14, all these down ones are 14, they look the same. So you can, the 7 is like I said with the normal map, it's something to get you used to it, but they always look like very black with some small, this is red, sometimes it's white, but it's an emission map. And then the biggest thing is there's two main ways that DE does their textures. This is the new way up here. So how this works is this one, which is _0, which is _0 is always going to be the where your actual textures are. So you can see these guys are a group in a sense. They're all the same size. And how it works is this is all the textures, this is the normals, this is the emission, and this is the tint masks. When you have a _13 in a sense, so there's one here too, this is the tint masks for this guy. This is the tint mask for this guy because it's the numbers. The number I said it doesn't matter. It counts up. So you know the one in the top is 60. The one all the way down here is like 4,000. So this is the new way. I'm gonna do the old way first, and I'll probably do how to fix up the new way in another video. It's roughly the same. There's a couple small different things, but so if let's say if I want to do the new method, I'm gonna do that's too small. I'm gonna do this guy, which is gonna be him, him, and him. So I see that he's 311.00, so I can go to Gimp, open up, and I'm gonna have to go back to where I was looking, and that was 311.00. So if I open him up and just hit OK on that, now you have this. It looks like a mess, and the reason it does is because DE uses this alpha channel as this is the tint mask. So how it works is this top left quadrant is primary. Like when in game, when you're changing the colors of your warframes, you have primary, secondary, tertiary, and accents. So this is the primary tint mask. This is the secondary. This is tertiary. This is accents. And it's always going to be in that order. Top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. And the main thing you need to do when you're using Gimp is go up to colors, components, decompose. And what that does, if it wants to do it, what that does is it will, oh, there it was. I was just hiding in the background. What that does is, you need to change this to RGBA, is it's going to cut up all these channels, which is where everything is. So you can see there's a bunch of different textures here, and we need all these textures. So you open it up, set to RGBA, hit OK. Now if you go to your layers, you have everything's cut as a layer. So this guy, you have to get used to what they look like, and you'll be able to eventually identify which texture does what just by how it looks. This one is the metallic texture, and the way you can tell it's metallic or specular is white. The color white, it means it's very metallic, and the color black means it's not metallic at all. And he's usually going to be up here at red, but that can change. So you really want to get used to identifying them by how they look. And then I usually rename it to S, which is like industry standard for metallic maps. So he's named, he's done. This guy is, let me check what the other one looks like. Yeah, this guy is albedo. Albedo decal, it's your main texture is the idea. And you can tell that mainly because he's the last one. So like if I go to this guy, this one is the roughness, and the reason you can tell it's the roughness is it has very exaggerated like white lines in a sense. If you just compare this roughness to this texture, if you compare the two, this one's lines and details are much, much more exaggerated, which is why he would be R for roughness and this guy would be D for albedo. So you want to rename those just so you're done with them for a second and you can just not care. Now here's the tint mask that we got separated, and the best way to do this is they're cut down into a fourth of the size, which is not what we want. So what we want to do is go to View, Image, Guides, New Guide by Percent, and you might need to change the settings, but you want Direction, Horizontal, Position, and Percent 50, and to get a line. And then do that again, but with vertical. So now you've cut it, and now you can really see that this top left is a segment. You have the segments. And what you're going to want to do is you need to select and make sure you have its exact selection. And then Control C, copy that, Control V, it's in the center. And then the thing is, with Gimp, when I copied that and pasted it, I'm now in this floating selection here. And if I just left click off, it will automatically merge it with the layer below. And we don't want that. So Control Z there. And you can either right click and do to new layer, which will create a pasted layer, or you can just double click there and rename it, and it will save it as a new layer. This is the primary layer, so I'm going to do capital P. Right, so we have that, and I'm going to hide that. And now rinse and repeat for each layer. Control C, Control V. This is secondary. Hide that. And like I said earlier, you just want to make sure that you're actually only catching what the actual layer is. Don't go over the guides. This is tertiary. And then get this last corner. And this is accents. Once you have these four, you can delete. You can delete layer here and just get rid of it. And now we have these four. And what you want to do now is have the layer selected and visible and go to, if I can remember where it is, scale layer. So layer up here, scale layer. And you're going to be scaling this layer, and you want to change this to percent. and do 200%. You only need to do on one because of this lock here. So I'm scaling this layer up to 200%. And that's the reason why you need it to be in the very center. So when you scale it up, it scales it up perfectly from a fourth to the full thing. And now we have primary layer. Hide that and do the same for the rest of them. So I usually will try to only have one layer visible at a time. You don't really need that to be a thing, but it helps me understand what's going on. So 200, ooh, 200. So now you have the 4 tint masks all at the right size, and you're gonna want to move them above. This is the order you kind of want it to be, because these are all going to be overlaying onto D, and we'll get that. We'll do that in a second. The main thing you need to do now is Unity shader that we're going to be using, or at least that I use, doesn't understand these black. Like, you can't overlay it when it has black. So what I want to do, first I want to remove all these guides. But you're going to want to delete the black here. And this is the one big thing I've seen, which is a difference between Gimp and Photoshop, is this is very blurry here. You can see the lines are kind of blurry around. That's what happens when you scale it up. Gimp doesn't really like sharpen the lines, it just scales it. Photoshop, I feel, has more a nice of a scaling, but if you don't have Photoshop, this works just as well, in a sense at least. And what you're going to want to do is go to this color picker, select by color tool or Shift O, and have the correct layer visible and selected, and click on this black. And you see as I pull to the right, I'm holding left click down. As I pull to the right, I'm selecting more and more black, which is also this threshold over here. So you want a good threshold. I know good is a really bad word to use there, but you can see if I have a really low threshold and I delete the black, I have like black lines around all the white, and that's not really what you want. So I go back here. If you pull it until you're like onto the white in a sense, you can see that it ends in white. And this is what you want. If you don't, you need where the black was to be alpha. If deleting it leaves behind white or whatever your secondary color is right here, you can right click on that layer and do add alpha channel if it didn't have one. And the alpha channel will be this checkerboard. And so you're going to want to delete the black on every tint mask. So I'm going to do one at a time. And just make sure they look all right. And you see this is, my threshold was too high, because you see now the white here is all, it's transparent in a sense. It's still there, but that's too much. So I think it was like 100-ish. Okay, so now we have the 4 tint masks, just the white, and you can see when Warframe handles the tint mask in a very clean way. And what it does is the bottom has the most priority, and anything overlaying the bottom, you can see with these tint masks, they're overlaying horribly. They're on top of each other. You can see that the primary is just like entirely white. But the Warframe shader that they use is smart enough to understand that accents has the highest priority, and if anything overlays accents, accents goes first. And it's the same, tertiary has more priority over secondary, and we don't have that. So the way to mimic that is to go to accents first, select everything. So I do threshold 255, select everything, go to tertiary, and delete. And do the same, go to secondary, hit delete, go to primary, hit delete. And what that's done is now accents, you can see everything fits inside of the accents. The accents here is still extremely important, and it will always be the only thing you see if you have all layers shown. And you have to, what I call is deleting upwards. So we're going to hide accents. I'm just going to hide everything real quick. And you see you have tertiary selected, and just do the same thing. So select all, tertiary, go to secondary, hit delete, go to primary, hit delete, and then go to secondary, select everything, go to primary, hit delete. And now you can see the primary looks much more like a tint mask, and you can see as I show things it fills out quite nicely. So you should have the entire thing, the entire image filled. I say that, but you see we're missing a little chunk there, which shouldn't matter. It depends weapon to weapon, warframe to warframe, it depends. So don't take anything. If some little thing's wrong, don't assume that you fucked up. Like it could be that weapon, could be the way DE wanted it. If you're doing Tenogen stuff, then Tenogen guys do their own methods. So if some little thing's wrong, don't assume everything's horrible. Now, if I show the albedo down here, you see nothing changes, and the reason is because all these maps are on normal, and we need to put them to overlay. So if I do that real quick, you can see now we have it overlaying onto this albedo map. And you see as I hide stuff, it changes the color. Now, this is what your weapon would look like in-game if you set every single tint, primary, secondary, tertiary, to bright white. And the way you color your stuff, I usually try to, because you don't need the high stuff, but you can see the primary's on, this bit. So if I show him, I drag where he was. So now I have the primary tint mask selected on there, and I change it. Let's say I want this to be like a purple, like a dark purple. I go to the paintbrush, and I have the size set to ridiculously high. And you change the color. And you see, this is another issue that I didn't talk about. If I change to bright pink and I color, it's white. And the reason is because when you decompose, like we did at the very beginning, it sets your image to black and white or grayscale. So you go up to image, mode, and click RGB. And what that'll let you do is if I go back, color select the primary, and now I color, now it's pink. And you can see when you color this tint mask up here, it colors the weapon. I think it's a weapon. I really don't know what this texture is. So then if I go to secondary, and I can see secondary is that guy. So let's select him. Let's do like a dark purple. Tertiary is that guy. And you see when you have bright white, you can really drown out the detail, so I wouldn't really do bright white a lot of the time. And then accents is that. Let's do like a light blue. And something to keep in mind is, so like this pink here went onto the texture pretty well, and it should look pretty good in game in a sense, but these blues seem very washed out to me. See, like this is a very dark blue and it doesn't really make much of a change. So you can mess around with all these different things up here, and you can see like if I set it to linear burn, which is something I usually use, you can see it really did make it into the dark blue that I wanted it to be instead of this washed out thing. So I can try that with this guy. That's linear light. But you see there's a bunch of linear burn. Linear burn's a bit too dark, so I could do linear light like I did before, and that kind of makes it the same bluey color that I wanted. So you really should play around with a bunch of these until you get the colors that you want. And that's about it. Now, what I usually do is I save this file. So it would want to save as a DDS. You want to save as an XCF, which is right down here, because that is Gimp's file. Like for Photoshop, it's PSD. Gimp, it's XCF. And what you do, like if I just save that on into this RIP repo folder, it should look like, yeah, it'll look like this little Gimp thing, Gimp image. And the big thing, you want to save this, you can always go back, obviously name it something, name it to what the weapon is. But you can see this is 1.5 megs, and that'll start adding up much faster than you think it will once you rip tons and tons of stuff. So you don't want to save so many different XCFs, you just want to save like the one. But the thing is, I usually export this as a PNG, which if I remember how I export as, so like I'm just gonna keep the same name because it doesn't matter. Oh goodness sakes. So export it as a PNG, and all that stuff is fine. If you go here, you see the actual image that what you can see is only 207 kilobytes. So you really save a lot of space when you export as a PNG. Then you drag that PNG into Unity and use that. And if you want to change the color, you go back to the XCF that you have somewhere. The big thing is, so that's your texture. And the big thing is you just want to hide everything, show specular, you know, export as, and let's, you know, like weapon underscore S. So you want to export that, and then you go down here, export this as weapon underscore R. And just as an example of like the naming system I use, I show all that. Export that as weapon underscore D. And this is what, so I delete that guy. This is what it should eventually look like. You'll have your main, you know, this will be like weapon. You have weapon.psd.xcf, whatever. That's where you'd be able to go back and change the colors if you want. And you have the D. What I usually do is like when because you won't be able to change the color of this guy. So like weapon D purple. I usually name like my color schemes. So he would be that, the roughness and the specular. And then you want to go back. So we go back to Blender. We saw we were messing with this guy, and we have his normal map is here. His emission map is here. So we'd want to go into Gimp and open. I'm gonna have to go and find it again. Oh, it's in here. And it was 313. And you want to, if I open this, you see it's 1 megabyte. And you can either open it up here and like export it as a PNG. So like this would be weapon dot underscore N PNG, just to match the other ones. But you don't have to. Because you can, I'm blanking on where I put my stuff. Oh, in Blender. You can just go into here, and it's 313. You can just get these guys, copy them, and paste them here. And like I said, I can't see what they are, but Unity understands what a DDS is, and it will use them. But I usually, you can see this one's the normal map. He's a megabyte. When I export as a PNG, it's 217 kilobytes. So you save space, especially with the, if I open up him. So this is 1 megabyte for this emission map. And if I export it as a PNG, so I do weapon underscore E for emission dot PNG. I end up with this guy, which is 2 kilobytes. So you go down from a megabyte to 2 kilobytes. So you really should go through a little bit of effort to export them as PNGs instead of DDS, because DDS files take a lot of space. So this is what it should look like in the end. You should have your main color changing file with all the layers, and you can actually cut down space on this XCF if you go down here, because we don't need these anymore. Oh. You can just do delete layer. We don't need them because we have them exported as PNGs, and if you save as this guy, so he was 1.6 megs before, and if I replace him, he should be, yeah, so now he's 930 kilobytes. So it doesn't sound like you're saving a lot of space, but I've got like gigs of Warframe textures and shit. So being able to cut little space as you go along is a nice habit, so that you don't end up with a bunch of really not really that big textures, but it adds up over time. But this is how it should look like, and I can show you what my stuff usually looks like. If I go here, and let's just go to like Octavia textures, that is not a good example. If I can find a good example, that'd be great. Oh, here you go. So I have PSDs here, but you'll have XCFs if you use Gimp. It's the same thing. But you can see I have that texture. On the new system, they have occlusion maps, which you don't have if you don't have the _13. That was a Warframe update where everything kind of looks better. Well, things that are newer look better because they have occlusion maps, but they haven't updated their old stuff. But you can see, so occlusion, then roughness, then specular, and then you can see Garuda body, and I had an Orican color palette. And I didn't rename these, but you can see this is the normal map for the body, and that's the emission map. So probably not the best example, but you get the idea. This is what your thing should look like. And that's about it. And you just repeat that process over and over and over again for every texture that you want, and you apply it. I'd show you what this applies to in Blender, but I don't remember. I just took a random texture. But yeah, that's about it. I'll do another video on the new system when I get around to it.